Monday, Charleston's historic Mother Emanuel Church opened its doors for the first time since that tragic shooting took place. And now the AP is reporting that the president will go to Charleston on Friday. With the town still mourning the loss of several prominent members of the community, including a state senator, RT correspondent Emanuel AME was there and spoke to local residents about how Charleston is moving forward.
An emotional weekend in Charleston, South Carolina, following a horrific tragedy involving the shooting death of 9 people inside the historic Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina. Now, the main suspect here is 21-year-old Dylan Ruff, who appeared before a bond judge last week after being charged with 9 counts of murder and 1 count of possession of a weapon during a violent crime. Now, as you can see behind me, the vigils continue, with visitors and tourists alike leaving wreaths, flowers, and candles outside the doors of the church. All of this part of the healing process for the community.
We have to remain vigilant, and even though we have moments of joy tonight, as we're mourning, we can have joy as well with the diversity that showed up today. But we can't get comfortable. There's a lot of work to be done.
We don't have to sit here and wait till a tragedy comes to join and unite like this, to walk down the street and say, God live. We can get together without a tragedy and walk around and say, there is a God.
You know, if we can find that common thing, which is love, and see ourselves in each other and understand the importance of love and teaching that to our kids and, you know, the oncoming generations, that we just need to love. I think that's the best medicine.
Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Attending one candlelight vigil, I did have an opportunity to speak to a local resident who was nearby when the shooting happened. He recalls that event.
At first I was shocked. I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that 8 people had died, literally 1 block away from where I was sitting and 1 block away from where I live, you know. My thoughts and prayers go out to the friends and families and the victims. Other than that, I feel like Charleston's a very safe place, very, very, very easygoing, safe environment to live in.
Charleston County's chief magistrate has set a bond of $1 million for shooting suspect Dylan Ruff. His next court date is now scheduled for October 23rd. Emanuel AME, RT, Charleston, South Carolina.
All right, and joining us now live is Emanuel AME, back from South Carolina. So, Manny, tell us about the emotion going on there. What did you feel when you were there?
Right, it was very moving, especially over the weekend. You would expect in situations like this, there's a lot of anger, a lot of shock in the community, but people have really taken this in stride. The community, very, very diverse group of people that we saw out there, as you could notice in that report that I filed only a moment ago. Very encouraging to see that people overwhelmingly saying that this was an incident where, you know, it's a tragic event, but it does have a silver lining. It brings the community together. And so it is encouraging. And I think one of the more interesting aspects of this is how many more issues have come out of this horrific tragedy, really. Like, we're seeing conversations not only about race, but conversations about the gun debate. We know that President Obama last week came out saying that this is yet another instance of gun violence due to how easy it is for individuals to be able to obtain firearms in the United States. The issue of capital punishment, the death penalty. We heard Governor Nikki Haley talk about how the state will be pursuing the death penalty, but then we also know that the mayor of Charleston saying that he has a preference against it. So there's a lot of different conversations being brought up.
I'm glad you brought up Nikki Haley, because as we heard in the 4 o'clock hour of the show, that the governor is calling for the state to bring down the Stars and Bars flags from any state property. But now she also did say that that unlike the other places we've seen where there has been some racial violence, she says that this was not a case like Ferguson, this was not a case like Baltimore. What are your thoughts on that, since you were at all of these locations? Right,
and I think that overwhelmingly, especially in Charleston, when I was there, and the folks that I was speaking to, telling us that this is, you know, this needs to be treated as an act, as a hate crime. This needs to be looked at and pursued by the authorities as an act of domestic terrorism. And the fact that over the weekend we learned that Dylan Ruff had that racist manifesto that's now kind of dominating the headlines today, that brings up the discussion on the Confederate flag. That brings up whether or not this is something that that's insensitive in the part of of state officials or officials in Charleston to keep that that Confederate flag, especially the fact that that's on the grounds of the Capitol. Because while we were walking around, the RT crew that was out there over the weekend and last week, while we were walking around, there were American flags at half-mast everywhere you went. But the same wasn't true for that Confederate flag. And so that seems to be something that that's sparking a lot of this discussion, on top of the fact that this is already something that all over the country, especially in the South, when you see these flags, they have that connotation. They bring that, and it spurs this discussion all over the country, not just in Charleston.
Definitely something to be examined, especially because there was no violence, following this mass shooting. Thanks so much for filing that report. That's RT correspondent Emanuel AME.